Hello and welcome to Think Tank. In a bold move for justice, Norway is stepping up to the challenge Israel's violations of international law by seeking the guidance of the International Court of Justice. This episode delves into the implications of Norway's resolution and the critical role of Arab nations, especially Egypt, in opposing these transgressions. We've got some great guests, so stay with us.
Our world is becoming unhinged.
So, after Norway urged the International Court of Justice to mandate Palestinian humanitarian aid, let us now explore Norway's bold initiative. As tensions rise and international condemnation grows, what does the future hold for Palestinian rights?
Norway has announced its plan to submit a resolution to the United Nations General Assembly, calling on the International Court of Justice to require the Israeli occupation forces to facilitate humanitarian aid for Palestinians. This initiative reflects Norway's commitment to international law and addressing the humanitarian need of Palestinians amid ongoing challenges. The proposal comes in response to recent Israeli legislation that restricts the operations of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA. This law has drawn sharp condemnation from various Arab nations, notably Egypt, which has expressed strong disapproval of Israel's actions. The Egyptian government emphasized the importance of international accountability in the face of systematic violations against Palestinians and urged the international community to take a firm stand against these infringements. The legislation threatens the delivery of essential services to millions of vulnerable individuals, raising significant international concern. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres condemned the ban, warning of catastrophic consequences for Palestinian refugees and highlighting the irreplaceable role of UNRWA in maintaining regional stability. Leaders from several countries, including Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, have voiced their commitment to supporting humanitarian assistance to the Palestinians. As the situation unfolds, the focus remains on the Palestinian people's humanitarian rights, with Norway's proposal aiming to galvanize international support amidst rising tensions in the region.
Now we are joined from Geneva by Haitham Abu Said, the head of the International Human Rights Council mission to the UN. And we're going to discuss Norway's recent decision to seek an opinion from the International Court of Justice regarding Israel's obligations to facilitate humanitarian aid. Welcome to the program, Haitham Abu Said. Does international law mandate currently that Israel permit humanitarian aid into Gaza despite its ban on UNRWA?
Well, first of all, the Israeli decision to ban the work of the United Nations, the UNRWA, must be condemned from our sides. This is considered first a flagrant violation of the Vienna Convention governed by diplomatic framework, and secondly, it indicates the extent of Israeli insistence on its plan to deport Palestinians from Gaza and the West Bank, which have indicated that we have indicated ever since the beginning of the outbreak war in October 7th, 2023. We feel that whether there are countries that will join Norway in the International Court of Justice or not, the answer is going to be yes. We believe that the countries will emphasize their work, and they will boost the proposal of the Norway into the International Justice Court, but it's going to be done gradually, not in a one bulk, if you will.
And if the ICJ does issue an opinion in favour of facilitating aid, to Gaza. What enforcement mechanisms might there be?
Well, we have the Security Council mechanism, but we're still having a certain problem with this mechanism because of the U.S. position that's always opposing any resolution on Israel, and they are blocking by using the veto, especially in heavy violations, humanitarian cases. So we believe that we have another solution by going through the General Assembly, and this is a proposition that I made to the Secretary General Antonio Guterres and to the High Commissioner of the United Nations Human Rights Council, Mr. Volker Turk, to use the Article 108 of the Security Council resolution, and to put this matter into the General Assembly so that it can come out with a suggestion. It could be also binding to the Security Council, or it could be embarrassing to the Security Council in case they go on the opposite side by using the veto from the United States of America.
And are there any legal precedents that might support Norway's request?
Well, of course, we do have, but the matter is that most of these governments are not in favor today of expressing their intentions, frankly, into this matter, because maybe they have some, what we call it, some interest, vertical interest with Israel, and this is what's blocking today from having this mass resolution against Israel to stop. But we believe that the efforts of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the European Union, Mr. Joseph Borrell, is doing quite well. His, a great work in this sense. And we believe that we can also use, if everything goes as we are expecting, we can use also the European Court for Human Rights to expose this matter directly to this European Court.
And of course, we've heard that Israel has voted to ban UNRWA. Do you think this could be considered a violation of international humanitarian law?
This has two. They are convicted in two items. First of all, this is against the declaration of the Vienna Convention. UNRWA, it's a diplomatic entity that has a diplomatic status and goes under this Vienna Convention. Now, by banning this this organization, it means that Israel is not respecting. Sorry.
Please do go on.
Now. Hello.
Hi there. Yes, please do continue.
Yes, I was saying that Israel did violate two issues in this matter. First of all, they are exposing themselves against the Vienna Convention 1961-1963, because UNRWA goes under, as I said, under this declaration. And secondly, they are showing that they have no, they are not showing any interest to respect the international law, and they are going by the proper agenda, which is to transfer all Palestinians, as they already declared, and it is now obvious to everybody that this is their proper intention at the end of this war, to evacuate all the Palestinians from Gaza and the West Bank. And I believe that this is purely against the Geneva Convention, the Fourth Geneva Convention, and it also goes against all the other international humanitarian law, because what they are doing today by suppressing the people, by imposing hunger to the mass population, those who are still in the north of Gaza, and this is also against international.
And could you foresee a situation where more countries join Norway's effort? What does this mean for international for Palestine?
I believe that Spain will join, probably Italy as well, as we are to understand their position, and this position will boost the Palestinian Authority because it will help them by a strong recognition against the international community.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on the program. Haitham Abu Said, the head of International Human Rights Council mission to the United Nations, joining us from Geneva. Thank you very much for your insights. Now, the Geneva Conventions establish crucial standards for protecting civilians in conflict, ensuring their safety, dignity and access to essential aid. Let's now look deeper into the Geneva Conventions. Now to talk some more about this, joining us is Dr. Mohammed Shalaldah, who is a former Palestinian Minister of Justice, joining us from Ramallah. Dr. Shalaldah, thank you very much for joining us. What do you make of this initiative by Norway to seek an ICJ opinion to get humanitarian aid to the Palestinians?
This request referred to by the state of Norway in submitting a request to the General Assembly to ask for a legal matter or a legal case from the ICJ to get a consultant regarding the lack of commitment by Israel in facilitating the work of the humanitarian work and the relief work due to the siege and due to the banning of UNRWA in Jerusalem, which is a violation and contradicting the international humanitarian law and the interim procedures taken by the ICJ in the lawsuit filed by the state of South Africa. One pillar of the genocide crime is the starvation of the civilians, which applies to the banning of operations of UNRWA, which hinders the access or prevents access to the humanitarian aid and medical supply by civilians. So seeking this opinion by the GA with an initiative by Norway is good, and we hope that all the countries would join this request to practice pressure or illegal pressure on the occupation authority due to the lack of commitment by Israel to the interim procedures issued by the ICJ and despite its lack of commitment to the implementation of UN Security Council resolutions and GA resolutions. It is another legal asset added to the lawsuit filed by South Africa to the ICJ. It's also a legal justification before the ICJ to prove that Israel with its soldiers and leaders are involved in committing war crimes, genocide, and crimes against humanity. So ICJ is a court of countries that holds Israel accountable for the responsibility and to remedy the damage caused to Palestine and to hold accountable the individuals who are involved in committing these crimes. So the closure of UNRWA and the closure of the Liberation Organization and depriving the UNRWA staff from their privileges is contradicting the agreement concluded between Israel and UNRWA in 1967, and UNRWA is formed by a UNGA resolution. So it's one branch of UNGA. So Israel in this case is contradicting the agreement of diplomatic impunity and Vienna Agreement of 1961 and 1963 and agreement of 1986 between the state and the international organizations. Hence, Israel is not allowed. And here are a legal case before when they closed the Liberation Organization premises in GA. The organization resorted to the GA, and there was a dispute between the GA and the United States, and at the end of the day they confirmed that the United States may not close the premises of the Liberation Organization of Palestine based on the agreement of the premises in the 90s. So what Israel is doing as an occupation authority is an act of rebellion against the international law and international humanitarian law. They are contradicting UN Charter and violate it. So it's time now for the international community represented in the United Nations Security Council and General Assembly to impose sanctions like freezing the membership of Israel in the United Nations or taking procedures by terminating Israel from the United Nations according to Item 6 or Article 6. But the thing is that there's a recommendation. The problem is that the United States is using the veto inside the Security Council, and the United States is using it in unfair way against the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people, which confirms the fact that the United States is a main partner in the commitment of genocide by exporting weapons and immunities to Israel, which contradicts the American law on prohibiting the export of weapons to the states violating human rights. Hence, the Israeli legislations enacted by Knesset to ban the work of Norway are not valid, and hence the regulations and legislations and the laws enacted by Israel are not taken into consideration. They are null and void because the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people are identified by the rules of the international humanitarian law and Geneva of 1949 agreement, not the legislations based on history and Torah and the Old Testament, because religion is not a source of the international law based on the Article 38 of the statutes of the ICJ. So the Israeli statements on banning UNRWA and closure of UNRWA and all the statements against the Palestinian people by the Israeli leaders can never be shukr.
Okay, Doctor, I just wanted to ask you about that, because of course Israel is well known for ignoring international law. Are there some legal frameworks that exist to compel Israel to adhere to international humanitarian law, especially with its responsibilities as an occupying power?
That's true. Israel, up till now, since its first occupation of the Arab territories in 1967, they do not recognize Geneva Fourth Agreement regarding the Palestinian occupied territories. But I'm talking from the perspective of the international law, implementation, lack of implementation, and this is the responsibility of the international community and the responsibility of the Security Council, which is directly responsible for maintaining peace and security. The Security Council has to transform from being a preventive authority to an oppression authority, according to Chapter 7, like what happened with Iraq when they invaded Kuwait. So they have to transform from Chapter 6 to Chapter 7, because Chapter 6 does not oblige Israel with anything, and Israel does not apply the interim procedure. Many UN Security Council resolutions were issued and Israel hasn't applied or implemented them. And Israel has to respect the resolution of division and the resolution of right to return number 194. As a Palestinian people, we have the right to resist in all forms, and we are committed by the implementation of all the legitimacy resolution at the international level. And we joined more than 100 international agreements, but at the same time, Israel has ratified and joined many international humanitarian law agreements, including Geneva Fourth Agreement, but in reality, they are not committed to the implementation of these agreements. So there responsibility of the international community represented in Security Council to move from Chapter 6 to Chapter 7.
Well, I just wanted to ask you about that, Doctor, actually. I wanted to ask you about the international community. You were just coming on to it there. What role, perhaps, could the United Nations play in getting Norway's efforts realized?
United Nations has taken several resolutions either in the General Assembly or in the Security Council. The latest resolution issued by the GA based on the consultant opinion of ICJ on the legal matter. What are the legal repercussions of long-term occupation? But these resolutions without practical implementation by Israel are just ink on paper without imposing sanctions, especially by the United Nations and the international community. The international law will remain ink on paper again. The UN Secretary General diagnoses the violations against the Palestinian people and the lack of vaccination and the humanitarian aids and other violations. But on the ground, we need condemn, we need denouncement. As Palestinian people, we need practical and implementation steps. Where is the role of the United Nations in protecting human rights? Where is the role of the ICJ in protecting human rights? Where is the role of the Security Council? So all of these institutions are assigned to implement the international law. The international law on the Palestinian cause in the Security Council. When we asked to obtain a full membership in the United Nations, we have observed how the United States of America used veto right. So the use of veto by the United States in unfair manner paralyzed the Security Council, paralyzed the UN Charter, and weakened the international law. And now the ruler and the governor of the international relations is the law of power, not the power of law, which is the responsibility of the United Nations. When we talk about the international community, we're talking about 193 countries. What is the stance of these countries regarding the genocide crime practiced every day against the Palestinian people and the civilians and the residents of Gaza? Israel has ratified Geneva Fourth Agreement of 1951. There is a call or invitation based on GA resolution and the consultant opinion of ICJ to call and invite the parties to the Fourth Agreement of Geneva to oblige Israel to respect and apply this agreement. But in reality, there is no kind of implementation. There are threats against the judges of ICJ, and we are waiting for Mr. Karim Khan, in cooperation with the preparatory chamber, to issue memorandum of stopping why the double standards are there. Let's see how the ICJ or the Security Council, how they dealt with the war in Ukraine and the Palestinian cause, how they were selective. There is a misuse and unfair use of power and unfair use of veto regarding the voting of any issue related to the Palestinian people, on top of them the right to self-determination and the establishment of their own state, which contradicts the international humanitarian ethics and the Morton's principle in the international humanitarian law and the US laws and Wilson principles of 1918 that were enacted, including the right to self-determination by peoples. It contradicts labor American principles. So where is the international law today in the implementation of the right to self-determination of the Palestinian people, that crimes are committed every day? Hence, the international community has to move to maintain the security and peace based on Chapter 7 by imposing sanctions on Israel. Otherwise, Israel will keep violating the international law and the UN Charter.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us on the program. We were very interested to hear your thoughts. Dr. Mohammed Shalada, who is the former Palestinian Minister of Justice, joined us from Ramallah. Now, as the world watches, Norway's commitment to upholding international law shines as a beacon of hope for Palestinians. This pivotal moment raises questions about global accountability and the future of humanitarian aid in the region. Will the international community take a stand? It remains to be seen. Thanks for joining us.